current AI systems can far outperform even like the world champions. In a few years, I think it will become better than me, even in the areas that I am really good at. For most of us, we've encountered AI in science fiction before we encountered it in real life. People are now using AI to write legal briefs. Who knows, like some judge somewhere is using AI to write their judgments. I want a machine that can peel and cut my vegetables for me.
Things which are typically difficult for humans is relatively easy for the AI to do. And I think it'll be interesting to see when that finally also eventually overtakes human capability.
I'm sure there will be some jobs that will be lost to AI.
Good afternoon and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. Today I'm delighted to have with us on this lovely rainy day, Professor Kaushik Gopalan. Professor Kaushik is an associate professor at Flame University in the Department of Computer Science. He completed his MS in Electrical Engineering and PhD from the University of Central Florida, USA. Post that, he was a researcher with the Earth System Science Interdisciplinary Center, University of Maryland. And then he spent 9 years with ISRO, with the Space Application Center. He's also been a regular contributor to various missions of NASA. So with that, a warm welcome to Mr. Professor Kaushik. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Vivek. It's nice talking to you.
Walk us through your journey as to how you really made those choices and how did you really move eventually, first into research and then into academics.
I did my engineering in Bangalore in a college called RV College of Engineering, which is pretty well known there. And I didn't feel that I had learned enough, so I went to grad school to America. I got interested in working with satellite data. So I worked with some of NASA's data when I was in grad school and in Central Florida. And then I worked with it when I was a researcher at Maryland. And then I leveraged that knowledge and experience that I had to kind of get into ISRO. And I spent 9 years at Ahmedabad at the Space Application Center in Ahmedabad. And then it was time, it was at a personal level, it was time for me to explore new challenges. And when I did my PhD, I did it with the intention of becoming a teacher, a professor, and it took longer than I expected. It took, I think, like 12 years or something after my PhD to get to an actual teaching stage. But I'm glad that I was able to make that jump, and now I enjoy teaching. I enjoy working with AI, with different kinds of projects. So
Right.
that's how I got here.
Right. And just for the younger in the audience right now, how has that switch been for you personally? Being in research, hardcore with some really premium institutes and now being with another premium institute, as an academician. How's the switch for you mentally?
I would say that has gone well. I've gotten the Teaching Excellence Award like every year that I've been here. So
Lovely.
I would say that it's been a successful switch. I enjoy you know, like when I was a researcher, a full-time researcher, it was a very specialized job, like working on very specific projects and problems. Being in academia, it allows me to multitask between many smaller and, some serious, some not so serious projects. So it like the difference is that, you can work on a wider variety of problems in academia.
Right, right. And I think before we, kind of go down the hole of AI, would love to really get some sense from you about the work that you did at ISRO and then also the contribution that you made towards NASA, some of the NASA's missions, right?
Right. So I guess first things first, like when I was in my PhD, I was working with a sensor from NASA's tropical rainfall research mission. Right. So sorry, tropical rainfall measurement mission. It's been a while. So it's called TRMM. And I worked with a microwave imager in that satellite. And my PhD was on improving the accuracy of the measurements from that satellite. When I moved over to Maryland, I came up with some improvements to the algorithm that is used by the same sensor to measure rain rate. And that sensor was used all over the world to monitor rainfall, in the tropical regions across the world. And when I moved to ISRO, I've worked with a bunch of ISRO's missions. I worked with Megatropics. There's a long running mission called INSAT 3D. So I worked with
Right.
a few of those. And then, I moved here.
Fascinating. I would love to touch upon some of this again when we are talking about AI. But I mean, just just kind of doubling down that subject. AI has been in development for many years. The theory of
Right.
artificial intelligence. Like I keep telling people that even your basic Casio computer, which does your multiplication addition, is in a way AI. It's artificial intelligence. It's synthetic intelligence,
Right.
right? But and we obviously made a lot of leaps, through like deep learning and everything. But something
Right.
seemed to have changed somewhere, 18 months back, right? But the
Right.
whole the progress that happened around Gen AI and the evolution of the
Right.
LLMs, right? And suddenly it's kind of
Right.
captured the imagination of people worldwide, right? So what do you think really changed that, suddenly brought this into prominence the way it did?
I wouldn't characterize it as something changing. I think it's just progression of things that have been happening for many decades now. So
Right,
even if we go just a few years back when we had Siri and Alexa and, the Microsoft thing, they were vast improvements over what existed, right? So, you know, Siri or Alexa, right? It's a major advancement in automated speech recognition. It's a major advancement in natural language processing, all of which have kind of led into what's happening now, the generative AI. Even before that, like, you know, just with like shopping and advertising and, social media, like we've been using AI, or companies have been using AI to decide what content to deliver to us, right? So recommendation engines. And
right,
we don't see it as explicitly or as clearly, but they've had major impacts in our life, like social media, like what gets delivered to us. I mean, it has been impactful. It is very much AI now. How intelligent that AI actually is I think depends on person you ask. Just to give you a personal example, a few years back when my son was a baby, I used to buy diapers from Amazon, and anywhere that I browsed, I would get ads for diapers on Amazon, and I was like, this is brilliant, you guys are geniuses. You're making sure that I never forget to order the next set of diapers on time. And I was
right.
really thankful. And then a few years later, my son grew a little older, and I guess almost inevitably, he developed a keen interest in watching cartoons.
Mm.
So I bought a smart TV on Amazon, and immediately after, for weeks, I was getting ads for other smart TVs. And I'm like, I totally overestimated you people, right? So I don't think, we've had major advances. Some of it has been patchy, like some things work like really well and some things don't work as well. But I think AI has been touching our lives like for a lot longer than 18 months. I think it's just that, like when Siri came out, there weren't as many people using Siri as there are using ChatGPT. So I think the scale has just broadened. So now everybody is talking about it because everybody started using this at the same time. Like, even if a lot of people bought iPhones, like they didn't buy it all at the same time. So I think there is this network effect that's probably feeding into the perception. But yeah, this is a big advance. Uh, it might change how a lot of us work and study and all kinds of things, but I think it has been to a large extent a progression of developments that have been going continuously over the past, actually decades, but definitely the past 10-15 years.
And when you think about the work that's currently going on, with the new Gen AI models, like, when you look at the independent company like OpenAI, you look at, let's say, the work that's happening with Llama and,
Right,
with Gemini and everything.
right,
What do you really think? I mean, we've seen significant ramp up, from, let's say,
right,
ChatGPT 3 to 4 to 4.0, right? It's blown us
right,
with those videos and, text to audio, text to video, and the stuff, right? But a lot of people are now saying that you probably are looking at some kind of flattening of that growth curve. And
right,
of course, those are some observations, and people
right.
have their own thing. As a person who's an academician, as a computer scientist, what is your view? I mean, do you think that there's enough headroom still for that? Because if you think about it, somewhere, Professor Kaushik, we are right now looking at the training data is getting limited because all of internet
Right.
in some ways has been used. There are some islands of proprietary data left around, but that's been used. the compute power has, been significantly ramped up, right? The parameters, we're talking about billions and billions. So where do you think, is there headroom for growth, or, are we going to see an inevitable flattening?
Somebody said you should never make predictions, especially about the future. Maybe it was Yogi Berra or somebody like that. But
Yeah,
my feeling is that I think things will improve. I don't know by how much, but definitely, you know, for example, let's say ChatGPT 4.0, right? The latest version.
right.
It writes some really interesting rap songs if you ask it to,
Yeah,
but it writes really boring and like irritating emails. It can write, it can create like really interesting recipes for you, like something probably more formal, like a essay or a description of something. It does like not that great a job. So I think the current state of the art in terms of capabilities is still mixed, right? I don't think it's gotten as far as it will, because if you think about something like chess, right? The current AI systems can far outperform even like the world champions, like the
yeah,
greatest players of the past few decades. The AI can beat them easily. So when you think about something like, I mean, I use it for coding and maybe other things to play it around, but primarily my use case is for writing code. I'm not like one of the best programmers in the world or anything. And for me, it's already doing much better than I can for most things, except for the one or two areas where I have a lot of experience and I have a lot of expertise.
mhm,
But I don't think that will last. Like, I think in a few years, it will become better than me. And I'm not saying that I'm the benchmark or anything, but I think like just from a personal perspective, I think it will become better than me even in the areas that I am really good at.
mm,
And then who knows what happens after that. But I do feel that there is room for improvement. And there's one more thing which actually ties in directly to the work that we are doing here. It's very good at Anglo-centric things, English-centric things. But when you start doing things in, other like non-European languages, the performance is highly like inferior to what you can get in English. So one of the things that we focus a lot on is what can we do with Indian languages, right? So I think companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, I think they recognize this and they're focusing on this. But just today, at this state, its performance is still very like English focused. So that's another thing that will probably improve in the coming years.
right. So really, as a researcher and as a scientist, I mean, how do you really think about the idea of intelligence? When we talk about the idea of intelligence, and there've been a lot of thought lately by, I would even say, some of the stalwarts like Roger Penrose and and the like, where they've started kind of dabbling with the idea of intelligence, consciousness, and so on and so forth. Could you just kind of share some thoughts, linger on that point, and let us know what you believe is really happening out there?
Yeah, I think I'll be honest with you. I think that discussion is a bit philosophical for my liking, and it's not something that I have any real expertise on.
Mhm.
But you know, just as a layperson and not as
Sure,
an expert, I think there are people who will say like, "Hey, all of this is just predicting the next word,
that's right.
uh, or the next token," and I mean, it's just software that's predicting the next token based on a lot of training data. I think that kind of thinking is a bit misleading because, I mean, ultimately that's what we do as well, right? Like when we are formulating our thoughts, like ultimately based on the context, you're kind of deciding what the next sequence will be.
Only our tokens are a little less expensive than the tokens.
I don't know, less or more
Yeah,
expensive.
that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's
but I think that doesn't capture exactly what is happening. I mean, it's showing real skill at tasks that we need to get done,
mm,
right? So, in any sort of normal definition of intelligence, and I mean, like just from a lay definition of intelligence, like, like if another person did what ChatGPT did, we would say that hey, this guy or this person is highly intelligent, right? So, I mean, I don't know whether all of this satisfies formal technical definitions of intelligence, but it's showing capabilities, right? And I think another reason why people are so invested in defining consciousness, intelligence, generalized AI, is because, again, this is a lay opinion. I think it's because for most of us, we've encountered AI in science fiction before we encountered it in real life, right? So I think a lot of the anxiety or interest about what will happen if AI becomes like super AI
Yeah.
is, I think, from the history of science fiction that we've consumed, right? Not read any science fiction. I don't think they're looking at ChatGPT and saying like, what will happen if this thing will take over the entire world and enslave humanity. So I think
Right.
some of the anxieties come from that. I think there are a lot of risks and problems with AI, uh, and a lot of them will come a lot before you know AI singularity or anything like that becomes a possibility. I think we have much more immediate problems that we have to worry about with AI.
Right. And of course, my intention of just asking about consciousness was not necessarily from the very from a dystopian point of view, future point of,
Okay.
but really just trying to understand that the intelligence that is there, how are the scientists, what's the kind of work that's happening, trying to understand, because in fact, we have even had people like Jeffrey, Hyten from London, even him saying that we have no idea what really is happening inside, and so any thoughts on that? I mean, how exactly is
Ah,
it?
right. So I think there's the kind of sort of connected issue of explainability in AI,
That's right. Yeah.
which I think is slightly different from consciousness or intelligence in itself.
Mhm.
But if AI is going to be used for making decisions, right? And those decisions are not explainable,
Mhm.
then that's a big ethical, legal, moral problem, right? So people are now like using AI to write legal briefs, and who knows, like if some judge somewhere is using AI to write their judgments, and if you don't know why the machine gave the answer that it did or came to the decision that it did,
Mhm.
that's a problem at all kinds of levels. So I think one of the immediate problems that we will need to tackle as these kind of AI systems get used more widely is, how do we make them more explainable? And I think that's something that, I mean, it's again not my area of work, but many scientists are pursuing that with
Right.
a lot of effort and seriousness.
Right. And what is again when you look at the next, what should I say, the next door that is going to open up out here? We really coming from stuff like machine learning to deep learning to LLMs. What do you think is the new next frontier that you think is happening, which might probably give us the next level of breakthrough at this point?
I don't know, and I don't think there are many people who can really say with any kind of certainty what is going to happen. I think we have a lot of creative, ambitious people in the world, and
Right.
I think they're going to somebody or the other is going to invent ways of expanding this or using this or improving this in ways that we didn't expect. One thing I would say is that I hope, again, who knows what's going to happen, but I hope that some of the more mechanical elements of AI, like physical elements of AI,
Hmm.
will also have a big boost. Like, for example, now cars, the technology exists for cars to park themselves or to brake if another object comes too slow. So I think those kinds of AI will hopefully develop further and become more, ubiquitous in the coming years. And I mean, I would like my vacuum cleaner to be better than the Roomba that I have. I mean, this has been in science fiction from I don't know, I guess since like the 1950s. I want a machine that can peel and cut my vegetables for me, like properly, like without me having to do anything. Like I give it a carrot and it peels and cuts it. I mean, those are things that we've been promised for a long time,
Mm.
and which haven't come yet.
Yes,
So, um, and they're hard. They haven't come yet because they're hard to do. But
right.
I hope, with all of these like increases in hardware capabilities,
Mm.
with the developments that are going on in labs all over the world in robotics, I hope those kinds of things will also catch up with, science fiction.
Yeah. So basically, what I hear you say is that, I think the Moravec's paradox, right? I mean, the things which are typically difficult for humans, like making those complex calculations and, playing chess at a grandmaster level, is relatively easy for the AI to do. And the thing which are really easy for humans, like peeling a vegetable, just walking down, is where I think AI and, the AI add-on, the robotics, powered by that seems to be, and I think it'll be interesting to see when that finally also eventually overtakes human capability.
Right. Now, again, and who knows what kind of impact that will have on society. Like we assume that it's going to be a good thing, but
Yeah,
I mean, all of this is unprecedented, of course. So I hope that as a society, we walk into all of this with our eyes open.
right. That's going to be the big question because usually regulation and building rail guards usually an afterthought, almost always an afterthought, right?
Yeah, and for example, like things that have snuck up on us, right? Like social media,
Right,
um, or just the internet, right? Like, I mean, I think about how the internet has impacted my life, right?
right.
And there's obviously many positives, like probably uncountable number of positives. Like I have access to immense amount of information, which is really useful for me. I don't have to go stand in a line to book tickets or pay bills anymore, which
Mm.
I am old enough to have done, and
Yeah,
maybe not many people are these days, but that's an experience that I hope never to have to repeat in my life. So
yeah.
there've been real positives, but then the negative is that I mean somehow or the other, like I always run into something stupid somebody said on like LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and so like I'm a lot angrier and irritated than I used to be.
Mm.
And I mean, we didn't choose this really. I mean, most of us didn't like sit and make a decision that these are the trade-offs that I am accepting when I
Right,
choose to use the internet. It
right.
just happened. And I mean, I'm sure there are people who are handling all of this much better than I am. And I'm
Mm.
sure there are people who are handling it worse than I am.
Yes.
So, but at a societal level, at a public policy or just also at an individual level, there are going to be changes that hopefully we can embrace, but with our eyes be completely open about what is exactly going on. Just from August, we are going to be offering a course for our first years, which is completely open. You don't have to be computer science or STEM or anything like that, about
Right.
AI for beginners. What
Mhm.
and what I'm going to be teaching there is, you know, like for example, ChatGPT, right? All of us use it. All of us don't need to know exactly how it works. Like all of us don't need to know about machine learning models and deep learning and all of that. But how does it work? Like at a basic conceptual level, right? How does like if you ask a question, what happens? Like how does it decide on what the answer should be? These are things that, everybody, even if they don't touch a single line of code, can appreciate, right?
Right.
So that's one aspect of it, like for people, you know how does this work, just for their personal knowledge and understanding, and also how exactly is a good way to use these things, right? So one of course is
Mm.
ethical aspects, legal aspects, but also like what is it good at and what is it not. If you are going to ask ChatGPT to write an essay, or Claude to write an essay, what are ways of doing it intelligently and kind of thoughtfully, so that you can get the useful aspects of the AI, but also add your own individuality and your own knowledge, or a skill, to get like the best possible output. Because you know I mean, there's one extreme that will say that, hey, don't use ChatGPT at all, do everything by yourself. Another extreme, which I
Right.
mean, which are a lot of students these days, which will just put the question and paste back the answer. But you know we should be able to use these tools without, without using them as a crutch, but using them as intelligently as a tool. So those are things that we are going to emphasize, both as part of the curriculum, but also in general, as something that the university will highlight.
As a professor, how are you grappling with this whole thing about students submitting in essays which are completely nothing but a chat GPT spit out? And that's a reality that we're facing now, right?
That is a reality I think many places are facing. So, one of the things that universities all over the world are starting to embrace is, anytime there's a take home assignment, there's also a Viva, like a question answer
Yeah.
session, or a
Nice.
presentation followed by question and answer. So, that's one way where, okay, this is a tool that is available, use it, but then you have to demonstrate that you understand properly the answer that you submitted. There are, projects that we give which are open chat GPT, and then again, there's presentations and vibas. And also the focus is
Right.
then how creative can you get, right? But then there are some places where this doesn't work, right? Like, you have to learn to walk before you run. So if for really fundamental things like basic coding, or, basic
Mm.
mathematics, we've gone back to
Mhm.
pen and paper assignments, or like, no internet
Right.
exams, where you
Yeah.
can bring your notes, but you can't access the internet, because uh,
Just cut them
as
off the grid.
much, right, as much as we want to enable our students to use the technology that is there, there's a cost to this, right? And it's not just for students, it's for everybody, right? When calculators became like ubiquitous again, a lot of people lost the ability to do mental mathematics. And I'm not saying that it's something that I mourn the loss of or something. Like, it's fine that people can't do 99 times 101 inside their heads, which people of my generation, like which more people in my generation could do.
Mm.
It's okay. Like, you gain something and you lose some skills. But every time something comes up which can um, perform a human skill, I think we've seen that the human's ability to apply that skill goes down, right? And even something like navigation, right? It's been 25 years since I lived in Chennai, but
Yeah.
I could still tell you the turn by turn direction from where I used to live to my school or to places that I go to. But I
Right.
moved to Pune like 4 years back, and I have very limited navigation, because any long journey I put on the map.
Yeah.
And this is not just me. I've seen like professional drivers, like people who drive for Uber or Ola. Some of them, only some of them, but it's clear that they don't have any sense of direction beyond what the map gives them. And again, that's fine. Like, they're able to do that job fine, just fine, without having that skill. But it's a skill that's been lost. Like, if it's raining, or if the internet is out or something, there's some sort of outage, they won't be able to drive, right? So
Right.
uh,
Right.
as educators and students, like, this is a trade-off that we have to take very seriously. I think it's a trade-off that all of us should take seriously, but especially in education, we have to kind of balance the benefits of using a tool versus the cost, in terms of, you know I have to make it necessary for a student to learn something, otherwise most of them won't.
No, great points, Professor. In fact, Asad Sheikh had actually asked that how are education institutions preparing to adapt AI into the curriculums, and you talked about how you're kind of making it accessible Also, you're making multidisciplinary, and of course, the challenges that you
Yes.
face as a professor and how you have to try and stay that one step ahead of them, right? So great. And you talked about some of the work that you've been doing on the Indian language side, right? And
Right.
if you were to really step back, right? Clearly, the center of the world when it comes to AI, has moved to the Silicon Valley, like pretty much for technology over the last many years, right? I
Right.
think the sheer, what should I say, the dollars that are chasing AI there, the sheer computing power available out there, right? I mean, the rest of the world is simply outgunned by that, right? You do have, maybe a China, which perhaps is not only as good, but perhaps ahead. And then you have some of these outposts like maybe Dubai, Singapore, which are kind of attracting talent, right? So,
Right.
really in this context, what do you really see a role, for the Indian startups or even for that matter, Indian enterprises to kind of, play out here?
Again, I want to preface this by saying that, I mean, again, this is a personal opinion, not out of any real expertise. Like, if
Mhm.
I had a good answer to that question, I would be earning a lot more than I am earning right now. But I think one is the kind of, make for India thing, which we've tried in other domains, which is
Right,
customize things for the Indian context. And again, languages, of course, will play a big role in that. But I don't. I think even beyond languages, the context is different here. Like the culture and just the daily flow of life is different here. So there will be applications that will make sense here that people
right,
outside would not have thought of. In terms of the resources that are available, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like we are at a disadvantage, but that's been the case again, like as you alluded for a lot of other things. I mean, my sense is that there are a lot of creative people, and this is the sort of thing that, you know, I feel that we will be good at. So I'm optimistic that there will be India centric or India born AI applications that will come out and be successful. I am not confident enough to hazard a guess of what they will look like. I think somebody smarter than me will figure that out. For the first level, which is like building GPUs, building hardware, I mean, we've tried to do it, like the government has tried to do it. I mean, as far as I know, the impact has I mean, it's not really shown
right,
at this stage. And I think that's just even at the government of India level or, like a big company level. I think that battle is going to be really hard to fight. I mean, in the near future, I think
right,
we are quite a bit far behind, and it's hard to see like how we catch up in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. It's a bit hard to imagine that that's going to happen. If it does, that would be great. And maybe again, people are finding ways to make that happen. But personally speaking, I am pessimistic about that. I think on the second front, on building like from ground up language models or deep learning models, I think that's something that we should be able to do. Like, I don't think it's something that startups or universities like us will be able to do, but the government of India has many AI projects. I think they're capable enough and well funded enough to be able to do it. The big companies, Infosys, TCS, I think they have the capacity to attempt these kind of things and possibly be successful at them. And again, the big, the well-funded IITs, the big universities. Um, I think that, and again, it is something that they have taken up, like IIT Madras and AI for Bharat, among other
right,
places. That they have taken up this challenge at a fairly large level. So I don't think that it that's a battle that, or I mean, it's not really a battle, but I think that's a problem that we should give up on. Right
mm,
now, on the other hand, we had like Ola made its own
yeah,
LLM, and
looks like, yeah,
it seems like it was a skin on top of the OpenAI API. That's what it looks like from the outside. So, but yeah, I think for most of us, outside of these handful of really big players within our country, I think for most of us, the third layer where we pick on existing models and infrastructure and we build our own applications. I think for a vast majority of people who are interested in getting in the space or who are in the space,
Yeah.
for a vast majority of us, like that's the space which is available to us.
But when you look at, let's say, for example, some of the new evolution, because LLMs have been largely resource hungry, and that's
Right.
possibly the biggest reason that kind of keeps away, young startups or underfunded startups to kind of really be there. But lately, there's also been a lot of movement in the direction of, let's say, small language models. A lot of the
Yes.
edge computing that's happening in some ways,
Yeah.
and then there are very interesting experiments happening on the few shot learning and the zero shot learning, right? I mean, where you
Right.
focus a lot more on smaller data sets and really kind of and when the focus is really about, like you touched upon in a way, about the explainability, right? Really trying to
Right.
figure out the thinking, rather than just by using brute force and large training
Right.
models. Do you see there's a scope there for an interesting Indian startup to come up out there? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we use it a lot in our work. Like, for example, we have OCR for Sanskrit manuscripts, like for digitization of Sanskrit manuscripts, and we're trying to
nice.
use small language models to detect the errors, right? There are certain kind of character combinations or grapheme combinations which can't exist. So we are trying to train small language models to do those kinds of things. I mean, these are fairly niche and small applications, but there are applications where I think small language models, which don't take a lot of resources, they're going to be real useful. And we're also working on skins, like, applications on top of the OpenAI API. Like, for example, we're going to just again in August, we're going to pilot this language learning tool, which will
Mhm.
help. So, for the German courses and the French courses, um, it's not exactly like Duolingo or anything. It's more like conversational, where we are harnessing the power of the LLMs, but fine tuning it or kind of mm, engineering it to stay at the level that the course is at, right? So if a student just talks, who's learning German, tries to talk to ChatGPT in German, the level goes too far. So I think there are like niche applications that many of us will find that can be done with relatively either small resources or again as on top of resources that somebody's already developed.
The couple of questions for by Juhi and Fahad, and I'm just paraphrasing them. It's about AI and
Okay.
jobs, right? And I think much has been written about the impact of AI, and there are different takes. I mean, right from job displacement to job replacement to then optimists talking about job creation, and unleashing the next big wave of productivity and jobs thereon, right? Which camp do you come in at this problem?
I hope it's the latter, but again, it's hard to imagine what that's going to look like. I hope that happens. What is easy to imagine and what's already visible is that, again, I'm speaking from a like software developer kind of perspective. I think it's going to take like 15%, 20% of the team size to do projects that it took like before these LLMs came, like just from what exists. If I have a Chat GPT plus subscription and I have uh, like the paid Claude subscription, Claude.ai subscription, I think my productivity can go 5 to 6 times in terms of writing code than it was prior to these tools. And I think, I mean, except for the really, really best programmers, for most of us, there's going to be a lot of productivity gains. All right. So I feel that companies are going to do like the current basket of work that exists. Companies will be able to do, or probably even now can do with far smaller people, far smaller staff strength than they have now. That said, the basket of work that needs to be done, it just kind of expands. For example, we used to have a lot of web designers, web developers, and as the tools required for web development and design have gotten easier, like they've gotten better, the complexity of the web ecosystem has also increased. So I don't know the exact numbers, but people still hire like web developers in
Right.
larger numbers. It's just that they get to do a lot more than they were able to earlier. So I'm sure there will be some kind of jobs that will be lost to AI. I think there will be some job descriptions that will change, and the
Right.
jobs will still exist, but a lot more work will be done. And I hope there will be new classes of jobs that will come because of the AI that exists. But
Mm.
again, what they will look like, I hope, time will tell.
Right. I think already we're seeing, things like the prompt engineers, and then we're looking at people looking at policy. We're looking at people of super alignment, right? I mean, so these are the new jobs that are coming in.
Right.
There's a
Right.
question from Desmond saying that, so you worked in NASA and also in ISRO. Tell us, I mean, any interesting story, and really comparing the two environments.
I should clarify. I never worked at NASA. I worked on
That's
NASA
right.
funded projects at the university. I was in entirely different circumstances, so I don't think I have something that compares the two.
But how was ISRO
Um,
as an experience? I mean,
it was a great experience, and there's a lot of incredible intellectual power, like in the staff that they have.
right,
So and they do a lot of great work. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's an incredible place. I valued the time that I spent there. Yeah, I don't think I can share like specific stories or anything like that. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
sure. Yeah. And then there's this question here from Bizan saying that, uh, more on prompt. She's saying that what's the best way to use AI effectively? How do you question it in the right way to get the best answers? Any thoughts on that?
Right. And that's something that I think the most important thing is to be mindful of, what's coming out, right? I think the most important thing is to be clear-headed about what you need, right? And if you're clear-headed about what you need, then you can express it in a precise way. And the more precisely that
Right,
you express it, the better it will do. And then it's a question of iteration, and I think a lot of it is not so much skill as it is about not being too easily satisfied, right? If you experiment a bit more and try to get it to do something of a higher quality, like sometimes you can do it with relatively little effort, and sometimes of course there are things that it's not capable of. But I think a lot of prompt engineering is about effort and not so much skill,
right.
effort and clarity of thought.
Right. I remember on my summer job after my MBA, we kind of got a 2 days of orientation on how you have to be focused on your information read before you start building the survey out, right? Being
Right,
clear
right,
about what is it that you're really seeking rather than,
right.
putting all those, long-winded, subjective, quantitative, qualitative questions, right? And I think that seems to be still what you're talking about.
Right. And I can give you a specific example, right? Just from yesterday, right? So I'm trying to figure out what is the best way that I can build a chat interface, right?
Mhm.
And if I just ask, like, I want to build a chatbot, like how do I do this, right? And then it gives me a lot of stuff. But if I say that I have a chatbot interface that I built on Streamlit, it's too slow. So my requirements that are that it should be faster, it should have the same functionality, and it should cost this much, or it should be hosted on such a thing. Then it gives me like much more concrete, better ideas. And then it's giving me three different sets of ideas, and I say, okay, what I want to do is I want to implement this using React JS and Fast API.
Mhm.
So then as you iterate, it can actually solve the problem that I have for me It
Mm.
just requires me to be really clear about what is it that I want to get done.
And in your
Espe-
mind, I mean, we've been using OpenAI thanks to I would say, the $10 billion largest given from by Microsoft, because it picks up the cost of all the tokens, and 4.0 is free right now. So how long do you think before the economies will kind of make sense, start making sense? Because right now, I believe it was initially a factor of 1,000, the cost versus whatever. And I mean, what do you think is really happening on that side?
I don't think that, a lot of this information has been released. We don't know, except for speculation, how much is it that OpenAI actually spends. And I mean, last that I checked, they haven't even publicly released like how many subscribers that they have. Like we know that each subscriber is paying 20 or $25 depending on the kind of subscription that they have. But I haven't seen release that says that, hey, we crossed 1 million subscribers or whatever, right? So they haven't really
They
disclosed that.
released, I
uh
think, for overall subscribers of 100 million when we kind of exploded. But paying per
but
subscribers, you're right. Yeah,
paying
paying percent.
subscribers,
Yeah,
yeah,
they've never talked about.
right.
Yeah,
So and a lot of the costs that I mentioned is somebody saying something. We have no, like, nobody who's revealing their true identity, as far as I know, has never said that this costs this much, right?
right.
I mean, I'm pretty sure about OpenAI. I don't think they've really disclosed it. I don't think any of the other major companies have disclosed it either. So we have no real information to kind of make predictions. I'm just thinking that, look, I mean, if they are continuing to do it, you know, eventually they must see a path to sustainability. Again, like they've been cutting down the costs of the new models like very aggressively. Like for the API calls, like it used to cost like maybe 10 cents for something. It costs like a fraction of a cent now. So I mean,
Yeah,
they're not giving off the vibe of a company that's hard pressed for cash.
right.
I mean, that's what I can say.
I think with Sam Altman at the helm and Microsoft behind them, they're hardly a company which is hard pressed for cash right now.
Yeah.
Of course, it's been doing well in that sense. On the revenue, I think they're on route to kind of make $2 billion. I think this year, as a combination of the APIs plus the subscription. But yeah, the expenses, of course, currently the unit economics are not adding up. But I guess they know where they're at, right? In that sense.
Right. And Amazon was unprofitable forever and ever and ever.
Right,
So
right, right, right. And maybe perhaps the last question. There's a question here from Viren Chabra. We said, sir, in your opinion, which would be the field where AI would get the toughest competition from humans? And maybe I could add on top of it. Which job do you think is not going to get taken away by the AI in the near future?
so I think at least in the near future, it's really not that AI is going to eliminate job categories. It's just
Hmm.
going to make those jobs more productive, which means that we might not need as many of them. But I'm sure
Hmm.
AI is not going to take over the jobs of doctors for, I don't know,
Right.
for a long time, even though
Mhm.
there is a lot of
Yeah.
kind of machine learning, deep learning research on how to help do better
Mhm.
diagnosis, like how to interpret
Right.
X-rays better, right? So,
Right.
and also like for drug development, like there's a lot of AI that's going into that. Even with that being said, I think we will continue to have a lot of doctors for a long time. I think like we're going to have a lot of drivers for a long time. Like I don't know if, I mean, if that's a job category necessarily that a lot of people are interested in, but I don't. I think as a skill, like a life skill, I think we will probably still need to be able to drive. Like even with artificial aid, we will probably continue to drive for at least another 1 or 2 decades.
Definitely
Um,
in India, given our sensibilities.
Actually, I feel that AI would be really more beneficial in India, like just like having a radar stop when something is close by.
Right.
I think that's more than a lot of like humans do here. Uh, or like slow down, when you're like, I mean, I would greatly support if there is some sort of regulation that says that there has to be AI in every car from 2030 that will make cars slow down when they approach a intersection. That would save a lot of lives, and it would just make like
That's true.
driving so much less stressful.
Very true.
Yeah, yeah. And probably like chefs. I don't think AI will replace chefs in the foreseeable future.
Right. No, great, Professor. On that note, we are upon the hour, and thank you so much for your time. It was very interesting. Lovely chatting with you, knowing about your journey, about really knowing the frontiers of AI and the work that's really going on there. Thank you so much. Love to catch up with you again, maybe on Thinkly or maybe at your lovely campus sometime. It was a pleasure having you over.
Same here. This was great. Thank you so much.
Have a nice
Thank you.
one.
Bye.